So we've talked about the different mechanisms of pain, the three mechanisms: the tissue, the nerve, the system-wide pain. And I mentioned it earlier, and the truth is, rarely do these mechanisms happen in isolation. And usually when we're having a pain experience, it's some combination of all three of these mechanisms. But often one is dominating. So with an ankle sprain that's fresh, it's mainly the tissue dominating. If you've had chronic back pain for 20 years, that's a system-wide. Do you have fibromyalgia? That's a system-wide. But in that system-wide state, you could have a fresh injury. You can sprain your ankle while you have chronic low back pain or fibromyalgia. So having a combination of the mechanisms all at once. And what's important for yourself and anybody helping you through your pain is knowing which system is dominating at that time, or which system is driving the particular pain you're trying to work on. And so treating the driver specifically. So as mentioned earlier, uh, treating chronic low back pain or fibromyalgia as if it's a freshly sprained ankle isn't going to work. It's going to frustrate you and perpetuate the pain experience. So if we say we have pain pies, like different percentage of the drivers of pain, well, every pain pie has a crust. We're all a bit crusty. And what is this crust to the pain pie? Well, it's the other factors that are involved. So those pain pies that we talked about right before, the three mechanisms of pain, these are very physical drivers. We talked about tissues, we talked about nerves, we talked about the central nervous system. The crust to these pain pies is all the psychosocial factors, the psychological factors, the social factors, the cultural factors, our histories, both trauma and non-trauma histories. So really what we're talking about here is just a different approach. The old approach, the approach of most of the 20th century, you could say in Western healthcare, has been the biomedical approach. You know, we're looking for the tissue that's broken and we want to fix the tissue. Um, and more pain means more tissue damage. And if we can't find the tissue that's causing your pain, it's all in your head. That's the old approach. That's the biomedical approach. But an approach that's been trying to gain more and more traction, it's been around for a long time, but it's just hard to hit the mainstream, is a biopsychosocial approach that takes into account how the nervous system processes injury, disease, pain, and threat, and emotions in the context of the environment and the culture. So the bio of the biopsychosocial model is the tissue. So thinking about your red flags, thinking about just the actual body tissue that's injured. But the psychosocial is our thoughts, our emotions, our behavior, our work, our culture, our religion, all these factors that does shape our nervous system. Because we said again, the brain is making a decision. Am I under threat? Well, the tissue information, the environmental information, our history, our experiences, our culture, our family culture, our ethnic culture, our current country culture, all these things affect the brain's analysis of, am I under threat right now, and do I need to make pain? So specifically, some of these crust psychosocial factors, they're called yellow flags in certain circles. Could be fear. We talked about fear avoidance, anxiety and depression. These are factors that will shape our nervous system and our brain's interpretation of threat. That idea of pain catastrophizing, worst case scenario thinking. I'm very well familiar with it with my own situations. And it does factor into our pain response. Family concerns, work issues. Is there a lawsuit? Did you get injured at work? In a car accident? All these factors can contribute to our expression of pain or our sensing pain, our nervous system's interpretation of threat. And there are different screens that if you're going to healthcare providers, that they may do to see if these yellow flags are driving some of your pain experience. And uh, this doesn't mean it's all in our head, but it's a factor at work. And for some people, it's a small factor. For some others, it's a large factor. The good news is there's things that can be done to address these yellow flags, these psychosocial factors. And as those get addressed, sometimes our physical pain, the bio aspect, actually starts to decrease. So if you've been in pain for 10, 20 years, for a long time, you've tried every medical, biological approach, and it's not made a dent in your pain, you owe it to yourself to even investigate. Are there these yellow flags? Are there other factors at work that might be driving my nervous system to be very sensitive to and perceiving threat and driving pain? And we mentioned earlier before, but it bears repeating again, some studies have been done on people who had engaged in contact sports as children tended to have less chronic pain as adults. And part of the explanation is, as children, if you got injured regularly or you saw your friends get injured regularly and yet recover and play again, you have, in essence, built some resilience to injury, to pain, knowing that you can recover and move forward. So all these factors can influence our brain's perception of threat, and they're worth investigating, especially if our pain has not improved and are getting worse. And no doubt you've seen that one provider probably hasn't helped you with all your pain. And really having a team can be very, very helpful. And depending on your persuasions, more holistically, more traditional healthcare, either way, having multiple providers can be helpful if they're all on the same page. Because if you're hearing from multiple providers, multiple explanations that seemingly are contradictory, that can actually increase the perception of threat and make your nervous system less safe, and feel more compelled to protect and to protect with pain. So make sure, if you are working with a team, that they're all on the same page, working together, collaborating with your best interests in mind. And as we start to wind down our course, we do have to talk about stress and the role that stress can play in pain, particularly chronic pain. So helping to lower our stress level, education does that. Education, the pain neuroscience education that you've been getting throughout this course helps to lower some of the threat value that your brain is perceiving, your nervous system is perceiving. Less threat, less stress, less activation of the sympathetic nervous system, which we'll talk about momentarily, and potentially less pain because of that. But we don't want to give stress a fully bad reputation. Not all stress is bad. And I've heard it said that stress is your body's response to something important. And so it's really, stress can activate our body's mobilization system. So you've heard of fight or flight. That's an activation of a defense system to get us moving, either to fight in our defense or to run as a defensive measure. So stress is not all bad, but it becomes bad when it overwhelms our nervous system, when this defensive response is just overactive. And when it's overactive, you have a lot of these stress chemicals being released regularly, which trigger those danger sensors, which trigger then the perception of threat in the brain. And so just an interesting comparison of people who have had car accidents. Often people who've had a whiplash injury, the average speed of their accident was about 5 miles an hour. And yet people can be disabled by this type of whiplash injury. And so studies have shown that when an injury occurs in a high stress environment, they are 7 to 8 times more likely to result in chronic pain. But interestingly, so we talk about somebody in a whiplash accident, in a stressful car accident. They've done a study on demolition derby drivers. They've seen how these drivers have engaged in hundreds, if not thousands, of collisions over their career. Their average collision is about 30 miles per hour. So in this study, they found that a small percentage had chronic neck pain. Think about it. No doubt they had plenty of whiplash in these demolition derbies at high speeds, but this group in this study had minimal chronic neck pain. Why? Because they weren't stressed. They were engaged in a fun activity for them. They knew that they might have this unexpected snapping of their neck back and forth. But because it was not a high stress environment, it was a fun environment, their incidence of pain was less. So a high stress environment, an injury in a high stress environment can, even if it's a quote small injury, because of the nature of the environment, it can lead to chronic pain. And all this partly because of the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. And so we've heard this term a lot. It's gaining more and more popularity in the culture. We've known it as the fight or flight system. And so it's not a bad system. We need this system. This system is used not only in defense, but when we're playing, we're having a good time, we're active in something pleasurable, and we need mobility. Well, the sympathetic nervous system is getting us moving. But what happens when this system gets activated physiologically? Well, you're releasing adrenaline, which then increases your heart rate, which then starts pushing blood throughout the body. But interestingly, blood, when this system is activated, is diverted away from the trunk. So I mentioned earlier how it's hard to do core exercises when you're in chronic pain. Because, yeah, you have less blood there. You have less control of your posture muscles when this sympathetic nervous system is activated. So the blood is diverted away from the trunk and into the big muscles of the arms and legs because you're going to either fight or flee. Your digestive, your immune, and reproductive systems are slowed down. Interesting, in the brain, an area called the medial prefrontal cortex, which is where we do our logical analyzing, our reasoning, this center sort of shuts down, and control is given over to the fear, emotional, reactionary centers, the subcortex regions of the brain. So often we just respond when we're in this fight or flight. We don't think, we just act, and we're surprised that we did something after the fact. So this is an important system, particularly if you're being chased by a lion. But this system is only meant to last for a few moments. But when we're in chronic pain and this very stressful world we're living, we're regularly in this fight or flight response. So it's like we're redlining the engine of a car. It's designed to maybe rev high here or there, but not chronically. And long term, that engine will fail. So similarly, our body finds itself in this revved up state. And in the long term, you can have pain almost anywhere. Your GI, immune, even reproductive system difficulties. You have poorer breathing patterns, more shallow chest and shoulder breathing, muscle spasms and fatigue. So we don't want this system overactive. And in general, 3 ways to sort of hack into this, what we call the autonomic nervous system, which the sympathetic nervous system is a part of, to try to soothe it. We want to engage in movement, we want to have safe touch, and we want to actually work on our breathing. Movement, touch, and breathing can really help make our nervous system feel safer. So this has been a lot. We have been talking about a lot of information here. Let's take a deep breath. So building on that idea of breathing. Uh, Again, gaining more and more popularity in the West. It's been done as a practice in the East for so long, taught to young people there. Uh, More and more people here are seeing the benefits. And really what you're trying to do is activate the diaphragm muscle, which is the main muscle of breathing, although many other muscles help. If you look in the picture there, it's located below the lungs. It's that green line there. At rest, it's up like a dome. When you breathe in and really use your diaphragm, your ribs at the base should expand in all directions. Um, the diaphragm pushes down and it massages your belly and your abdomen area there too. You really get to fill your lungs lower into the, the lungs themselves. And by doing this breathing can help send a signal of safety, particularly if you're doing slower, deeper breaths. It sends a signal of safety to your brain because your brain knows, wait, we don't breathe slowly and deeply when we're in danger. And so there's a variety of breathing patterns. One popular one is 4-7-8, breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 7 seconds, breathing out for 8 seconds. Really, when you're first trying out, just work on slowing your breath in general and trying to focus more on exhaling. It's in the exhale that you actually trigger the complement of the fight or flight system, which is known as the rest and digest system or the parasympathetic nervous system. It's not a miracle cure breathing, but boy, in the short term, you can feel some benefits of calm, clarity, uh, relaxation. In the long term, you're just helping even blood flow return. Uh, in general, you're helping mobilize your gut, which is often called the second brain. So many of our body systems converge in the gut, and because we rarely do deep breathing, this gut area rarely gets mobilized. So we get a lot of restrictions there. So simply doing some diaphragm breathing. We call it umbrella breathing too. If you think of your rib cage as a closed umbrella, and as you breathe with your diaphragm, the ribs potentially can open up in all directions. And that's something that most of us don't even know the ribs can do, let alone practice that. But working on trying to just slow down your breath, focus on your exhales, use your diaphragm more, um, can just be the start of giving your system a chance to reset and to really activate the rest and digest, or otherwise known as the rest and repair system. So in our final segment, we are going to discuss where do we go from here, recapping and looking to the future, where else we can go to work on our pain.